What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the show. So today we're going to talk about Social Security reform, and I'm going to give you guys my thoughts when it comes to will we see Social Security reform in the next 4 years. So that's what we're going to focus on in this video. But first off, you guys can do me a favor. Please like the video, and if you're watching videos like this, you want to see more, please consider subscribing to the channel. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is I want to go over to the U.S. Treasury website. And they have a lot of information just about our economy as a whole. I'm going to start doing some more videos focused on our economy too. But this video, I want to really talk about Social Security. And so what we're looking at right now, these are the sources of revenue for the federal government. And so we see this big blue circle here. This is individual income taxes. And then the second largest is Social Security and Medicare taxes. And we're going to talk about the differences between income taxes, and then when it comes to Social Security, Medicare, how that's taxed, because it's different. And then you have the corporate income taxes, and then you have some smaller areas here that collect revenue for the federal government. Now, why is it important that we're focused on revenue sources and where they come from? Well, first off, I want to take a look at Social Security, and what we really need to do is kind of draw a line like this. Because Social Security and Medicare, the revenue source is walled off from the rest of the revenue that's coming in for the government, which means that this revenue can only be spent on Social Security and Medicare. And so that is something that's really important, because when we start looking at, and I'll show you some more illustrations, you're going to see that Social Security is way up there at the top when it comes to spending. But what we need to understand is that money is coming from a different source. And let me show you what I'm talking about here. And so using this illustration here, I'm going to show you the spending when it comes to Social Security, how it is generated, and where it's going. So let's just say we have an individual here, and they are currently working. They are contributing 6.2%, and this is the payroll contribution, or the payroll tax, better known as. And they're contributing that from their paycheck. So if you're in a situation where you're getting $1,000 a week, well, 6.2% of that is going to the Social Security Administration. And then also your employer, in most cases, your employer is matching that 6.2%. And so that is for a total of 12.4%. That goes over to the Social Security Administration. They send that over to the trust funds. We have 2 trust funds for Social Security. And I'm mainly focusing on Social Security, but Medicare is run primarily the same as far as the collection. It's it's not the 6.2%. I think it's like 1.9 or something like that from you and your employer. And so that will go into trust funds. And so Medicare, they have 2 trust funds, and Social Security also has 2 trust funds. So right now, the trust funds are sitting at around $2.7 trillion, but it continues to decrease, and I'll explain to you why that's happening. Now, that money goes to pay out benefits. And so people who are currently receiving Social Security benefits, that's where it's coming from. It's coming from the 12.4% payroll tax, as well as that is not enough. 12.4% is not enough to pay out benefits at 100%. And so we have money, as I stated, $2.7 trillion that's sitting in the trust funds. So we're taking a little bit of that every time we pay out benefits. And so you have a large portion coming from the 12.4% over here, and then you have some coming from the trust fund to pay out benefits. That is our current situation. Now, when we start looking at overall revenue, how much money is the U.S. government bringing in? If we look at fiscal year 2024, $4.9 trillion is what we brought in this year, okay? And that will continue to rise. It'll probably settle somewhere around $5 trillion. And you're looking at that and you're saying, well, that's good. So we're talking about income tax, we're talking about the payroll tax, and some of the other ways that the federal government is bringing in revenue. That's at $4.9 trillion. The only problem with that is how much money have we spent this year? We've spent $6.7 trillion. And so you see we have a deficit here. And for the last 20 years, we've had a deficit every year. And with those deficits, what does that do? That adds to our national debt. And so you're saying, okay, well, why is this national debt at like $35 trillion? It's at $35 trillion because every year we have a deficit, because every year we spend more than we take in. And this year we're looking at $1.8 trillion. That's the deficit. That's what we're looking at. That will be added to our national debt. And so in the next 4 years, or even right now, you're already hearing this. You're hearing politicians talking about we need to take care of this debt. We need to pay down our debt. We need to balance our budget. All this stuff you hear these politicians talk about. But there's not a politician out there, whether they be a Democrat or a Republican, that doesn't spend money. And when former President Trump was president, he's president-elect now, but when he was president, he spent $8 trillion. Obama spent $8 trillion, but Obama spent $8 trillion over, it was like 8.4 trillion, but that was over 8 years. Former President Trump spent $8 trillion, and that was in 4 years. And then you have Biden, and we don't have the final numbers yet, but he's spending around the same amount, if not more, than what former President Trump spent. And so the next 4 years, we're probably going to see the same spending, because the reality is, if you're a politician and you're running for office, what do? You promise things. And guess what? When you're promising things, they cost money. It's not free. You don't have too many politicians running for office that are saying, I'm going to cut everything, because they know that's not a winning message. The winning message is, I'm going to provide this, I'm going to provide that, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. We might cut a little bit of spending, but we're not going to cut that much. And when you look at this illustration that I'm showing you here. Look at the top spenders. Social Security, $1.46 trillion. Healthcare, $912 billion. Interest on our debt, $882 billion. And we have to pay interest on our debt. And this is to not just, we can't just wipe it away and say, okay, well, this is money that we owe ourselves. No. We owe this money to other people. We owe this money to other countries. And so we have to pay that interest on the debt. When it comes to Medicare, $874 billion. Our national defense, $874 billion. Income security, $671 billion. And so if we're looking at this, and then we're looking at the fact that this year, the deficit is $1.8 trillion, where are you going to get $1.8 trillion from these areas here? You're going to cut from Social Security, $1.46 trillion. Are you going to cut all of that? You can't. That would mean that people aren't receiving their benefits. Are you going to cut from healthcare? Healthcare is important, I would think. $912 billion. How much can you cut? And you can say, well, we'll cut a little bit, from each area. That's still not going to get you to the $1.8 trillion, the deficit that we're looking at. And this is only for 1 year. So if you make all these cuts over a long period of time, that's really going to impact our economy. And you also need to think about this. You have jobs that are tied to a lot of these different government agencies. And so if you start making major cuts, that means you're laying people off. If you're laying people off, those people are no longer going to have jobs, and that's going to impact us in a serious way. And so moving forward, when it comes to Social Security, what needs to happen? We need to see reform. Will we see reform in the next 4 years? Probably not. And when I say reform, I'm not just talking about making little adjustments. You've heard some politicians out there saying, well, we just need to raise the full retirement age from 67 to 70. That's not enough. That's only like 21%, if around that number when it comes to improving the situation that we're in. We know right now that the trust funds will run out of money in 10 years, around 10 years. And so when those trust funds run out of money, now we're looking at a situation where you're going to see a cut across the board. 20, 23%, 25%. I've even heard it as high as 33%. Cut across the board for people receiving benefits. That is if you don't reform Social Security in the right way. And the right way to reform Social Security is to raise taxes. Now, I know people don't like to hear that. Politicians don't like to say that. But that's the reality that we're in. We're in a situation now where we need to raise the payroll tax, probably across the board for everyone. And so if you raise it 2%, and so instead of this 6.2%, it's now 8.2%, that would help out. That would move us in a direction where now the trust funds will be solvent and we'll be able to pay out benefits for another 50 years. We won't have to worry about Social Security. We can take that out of the economic crisis column. And we still have to address the fact that our economy right now is not going to get any better if we don't start looking at different ways to pay down our debt, to not run deficits, all of that. But when it comes to Social Security, the fix is raising the payroll tax. And the other option when it comes to taxes, and we've heard politicians talk about this, mainly Democrats, they said, you know what, we need to raise the cap. So currently right now, 168,600, and it will change in 2025. But currently right now, anyone that earns more than that, they no longer have to pay into the payroll tax. And so what they want to do is raise that cap. So now more people have to pay into that payroll tax, which means that they'll have more revenue for Social Security, which means you can extend the program out for another, let's hope, 50 years. And you'll hear politicians say we need the wealthy people to pay their fair share, things like that. But that is another option. Now, in my opinion, the most realistic option is probably going to be across the board, just raise the payroll tax from 6.2% to maybe 8.2%. That's more realistic. Why? Because the wealthy, they're going to say, you know what? We're not getting any more in Social Security if we're paying into Social Security. Because that's why they have the cutoff, the 168,600. So why should we have to pay more if we're not going to get any more? So that's going to be that argument. And let's face it, wealthy people, I don't want to say they control politicians, but they contribute to politicians at a much higher rate than the middle class and the working class and the poor. And so when it comes to raising the payroll tax across the board for everyone, that's more realistic. Now, how do you get people to buy into this? The way that you get people to buy in, and we have to have politicians that have the heart, have guts to actually say this. Look, we're going to need to raise your taxes. The reason why we're raising your taxes is because in 10 years, you're going to see a reduction in your Social Security benefits. And this will be automatic. We have no control over this. This has already been established. We know that this is going to happen. The only way that we can save it at this point is by raising the payroll tax. And so this will assure that you have your Social Security benefits when you retire. And most people will look at that. Most people who are working right now, they're going to look at that and they're going to say, you know what? I understand. I don't want to have to pay more in taxes, but I want to make sure that I have Social Security benefits at 100%. And so I think most people will buy into that. That's better than not doing anything, which this is my fear. My biggest fear right now is that in the next 4 years, we're not going to do anything. And then we'll have the next president come in. And then for the next 4 years, we won't see anything. And then guess what? Now we're looking at a situation where it's automatically going to happen because politicians couldn't stand up and say, look, this is what we need to do. The sooner the better. If we had politicians come out right now and say, look, this is where we need to go with this, then you have people that are working right now, they're contributing 8.2% instead of that 6.2%. Of course, the employer has to match that. And now we're addressing the issue when it comes to Social Security and this crisis that we're going to see if nothing happens. And so I just wanted to put this out to you guys. I don't really know what's going to happen in the next 4 years, but I haven't heard any talk. I haven't heard any talk of Social Security reform when it comes to President-elect Trump as well as Congress. And we have to face realities here. The Republicans they're controlling the Senate. They're most likely going to control the House. They're still tallying up the votes, but it looks like they're going to be able to control the House. And so now they're going to control everything. And they have not, Republicans in Congress have not talked about reforming Social Security in a way of raising taxes. They haven't talked about that. The only thing they've talked about is making cuts or raising the full retirement age, which is essentially a cut. Because if you raise the full retirement age from 67 to 70, that means you have to wait until you're 70 to start collecting Social Security benefits. And we all have an expiration date. And let's say, hypothetically, you have a person, their expiration date is 80 years old. Well, guess what? Now they can only collect from 70 until 80, where right now they can collect from 67 until 80. And so you can see that would be a cut in their benefits, their overall benefits. So I want to know what you guys think about this. So let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe for more, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye.